In the part of the Mueller sentencing memo that we can read about Mike Flynn, Jared Kushner's name is never mentioned. But the document does state this. Flynn gave first-hand information about the content and the context of interactions between the transition team and Russian government officials, and that kind of thing obviously could overlap with some of what Kushner's been up to. Remember, during the transition, he and Flynn, they worked in tandem, and not just on anything. We know already they worked on issues involving Russia. In fact, they were together in that early part of December 2016, meeting in Trump Tower with the Russian ambassador, discussing how to set up, among other things, allegedly a secret back channel to Moscow. Why would you need one of those? NBC also reporting it was Kushner who told Flynn to discuss the UN sanctions vote with Russian officials, which is one of the topics that we now know Flynn did lie about initially when he misled the FBI. It was during this period, the transition, that Kushner also took a meeting with a Kremlin-backed banker, a meeting that the Russian bank said was about Kushner's personal business, meaning they were telling the world it was him trying to get money for his own profits. Kushner famously said no, it was about Trump diplomacy. And then there was that rare appearance on camera where Kushner addressed some of all of that by going big and saying he never relied on Russian money at all.
Let me be very clear. I did not collude with Russia, nor do I know of anyone else in the campaign who did so. I had no improper contacts. I have not relied on Russian funds for my businesses. And I have been fully transparent in providing all requested information.
We are now going to rely on Shelby Holliday, a reporter for the Wall Street Journal, who's been all over the Russia probe. And I'm also going to rely on Mike Lupica, a reporter and longtime Politico. I start with you, sir. I'd like to rely on your analysis. As you know, that's a word that can mean everything or nothing, which is why it's so interesting that Kushner's lawyers had him use it. What do you see here in the tea leaves for Kushner?
Well, Ari, I love the fact that you keep holding up the redacted documents, and even when Mueller talks, he doesn't talk.
I can do it again.
Yeah, I do. I like it. Yeah, it's good. No, but if I'm Kushner, I'm extremely worried because even people in outer space know how close he and Flynn were in the transition. And this was the point where Flynn was being treated like some sort of foreign policy savant, as opposed to the grifter he had become. And so if I'm Kushner and I'm looking at all those redacted lines, I'm just praying, maybe he's praying today, that my name is not part of this now.
That's a good point. I also think there are some interesting things that happened during the transition. You pointed out he met with the head of a sanctioned bank. A big question central to the Russia investigation is, was there a quid pro quo related to Russia's help and sanctions later on? But we also know...
You're talking about the Kushner could be a sanctioned bank trying to get their help, or it could be the sanctioned bank that was trying to fund the Trump Tower.
And the head of that sanctioned bank reportedly told Kushner that he could provide insights into Putin's thinking. So the details that that have been reported on that meeting are pretty sketchy. Kushner also talked about the UN resolution, and I would also note that Kushner was part of the Trump Tower meeting in June of 2016. And if you read those Trump Tower documents that have been made public by the Senate, the party from Russia that was involved, the Agalarov family, continued to try to get in touch with the Trump campaign, well, then the Trump transition team after the election, and continued to push the issue of the Magnitsky Act sanctions. So it's unclear where those documents went, who they were sent to, if anything came of them, if Kushner was involved in that. But it could come full circle. There are a lot of details that continued beyond that Trump Tower meeting and carried into the transition as well.
Right. I mean, one takeaway, Mike, is that if you're into the foreign policy debates, it appears sanctions are pretty effective because Russia's constantly agitating to try to get them loosened. As for Jared Kushner, this is someone who famously has the portfolio of everything. And anyone familiar with management knows if you're trying to deal with everything, often you end up dealing with nothing. I wonder whether his inexperience here in government has given him more exposure, even though it all may be fairly shallow. This is how he has presented himself in his busy job. Take a look.
Every task he's given me from the start of the campaign through, I've been able to do it quietly, I've been able to do it effectively, I've been able to deliver results. I don't make a lot of noise. Noise is sometimes made about me, but I try to keep my head down, and I think that he's a businessman and I'm a businessman, and the way I look at it is that it's all about accomplishing the objectives.
Mike, he obviously means that positively. I think when you look at just this new sentencing memo all about Mike Flynn being a businessman instead of a public servant, plus Trump Tower, I think one of the big problems hanging over them is whether they were acting too much for business and not the public interest. Whether or not that proves to be a crime, we don't know yet.
Ari, so many of these stories, you start to think that they looked at the presidency and the transition and everything that's happened since as some sort of New York City real estate deal. There's an old line about how that no warning alarms were heeded because none were sounded. What did they think they were doing that day in June in Trump Tower? What good could they possibly have thought could have come from that? Because we know now they sure as hell weren't talking about adoption. And so much of this, when I watch these people, because remember all the times we were told the best people were going to be part of this administration, they start to look like the gang that couldn't shoot straight.
Yeah, and as they say in the law, Shelby, gang, gang. You know that saying?
I don't.
Gang, gang?
Sadly. No, sorry.
Well, I'm sorry you don't know it. But you do get a consolation prize regardless, which is...
I'm here.
No, you get...
I'm just here to win.
No, not only are you here, you get our final thought. What is your final thought on where this heads for Kushner?
Where it heads is hard to know, but I do think if you look backwards and you look at all of the things that happened as a result in the aftermath of these things becoming public, Kushner omitted a lot of things from his clearance forms. We know that he left off, I think, hundreds of names. The Trump Tower cover-up that was sort of botched by Don Jr. If there weren't something there, it just begs a lot of questions. Why was the fallout so complicated and ugly and messy for these guys? And what were they trying to hide? I think there are a lot of fears in the White House today.
Right. And what were they trying to hide, sometimes illegally? And to bring us full circle, Mike Lupica, what is Bob Mueller trying to hide fully legally under these black lines? We don't know. Shelby Holliday and Mike Lupica, always a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ari.
You look like you have one more thought.
Who, me? I
Yeah.
did. I was just going to tell you that I know what you were thinking about Mike Flynn today. It was the old MF Doom line. Snitches telling all their business, sitting in court and being their own star witness.
You're making me look really bad with my rap lyrics.
First of all,
Thanks,
Lupica for the win, FTW, as the kids say. And also, I wasn't sure, but I had this feeling through the satellite you had one more thing, and you did. And we appreciate you for that. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.